every day is like going to war, but there's very high highs and, sometimes there's low lows. And to be able to be part of a community of people that are striving for the same thing and realizing it's normal to go through these things, I think is important to talk about.
He was a consultant. He had his own business and AT&T would hire him for special projects. He turned me on to the idea of the 4-Hour Work Week, which was, of course, that really influential book by Tim Ferriss.
Just finding whatever that balance is probably going to make you a better entrepreneur, because then when you've made it, you're not sitting there like, oh man, I got nothing to show for it. I don't have any of the family. I don't have any of the things that I wanted to do all this for in the first place.
I could retire whenever that is, just calculating, okay, each one has, $600 of cash flow and I would need so much money to replace my W-2 income.
What you're doing is you're identifying a problem, figuring out what the solution is to that problem, and then selling it to someone else that also has the same problem or wants to fix that, with the solution. So,
and you could have the option to take it over while you're watching yourself talk to that person in real time. So those are some exciting enhancements that I could see being on the next, 1 to 2 years.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, it's your boys Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today we interviewed David Lecko. He is the founder and CEO of DealMachine, which is the highest rated mobile app to help real estate investors find off-market deals. He's also a real estate investor based out of Austin, Texas, formerly from Indianapolis.
Yep.
But today's episode, I know that was a brief intro on him. We just had a blast talking with David, and it was really outside of talking about DealMachine and outside of talking about real estate. Towards the end, we started talking a little bit of mindset and got into the struggles that entrepreneurs go through mentally and how to overcome those, and realizing there's multiple people going through the same thing. And every day is like going to war, but there's very high highs and, sometimes there's low lows. And to be able to be part of a community of people that are striving for the same thing and realizing it's normal to go through these things, I think is important to talk about.
Yeah, he mentioned, first of all, DealMachine's great. Like, I have not actually used it, but like talking about some of the AI features that he's saying now, basically you can use your voice, or something they're going to be rolling out soon. You can use your voice to not actually even be you talking on a phone, but respond to sellers so that you don't have to pick up the phone every time like a motivated seller calls you. But that's basically what DealMachine does, is it gives you access to motivated sellers in that driving for dollars type of manner, which is cool. But the mindset stuff that we were talking about with David, like he talked about, something struck a chord with me when he was talking about staying present, and he drove a race car. And when he was in this race car, something about that like kind of lack of control, he had to have 100% of his brain focused on the presence of being in there and trying to drive this thing. And that's helped him in his business and his life, so that he's growing this company, but he also makes time for the people that he cares about. And I think that's the entrepreneurial struggle. And we talk about it in the episode as we get towards the end. And I've been candid to say that I've had some of those issues as well. But I thought it was just really cool, because he's, from the outside looking in, you can tell that David's like, he's definitely made it, like without a hesitation of a doubt, but he still has some of those, normal growing pains, if you will, that everyone that's trying to build a business does. So
yeah, there's always, everyone has those internal voices and like, hey, what's next for me? Thinking about the future. Am I doing things right? Am I leaving money on the table? Should I be, I'm worried about my relationships. I'm worried about providing for people. There's so many things that circulating in the human brain. And I think as an entrepreneur, it gets even heightened because you're maintaining relationships, but also trying to skip years, retire early and skip years and try to make up now for what make up time for what you're going to forgo later. So I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Well, no, you are. It's kind of one of those things where you see all these memes and you're like, in order to live a different life, you have to be different. You have to do things unconventional. So there's this thought in your head all the time that you have to, I can't be sitting and watching Netflix. That's what an ordinary person would do. That's what somebody who just doesn't care as much about growing their empire would do. And that, even that is like probably unhealthy. It's probably, I wouldn't say that 24 hours out of your day need to be spent growing an empire. It's like, if you that finding whatever that balance is for you, it helped me in this episode even do that. I don't think David intentionally did that, but just finding whatever that balance is probably going to make you a better entrepreneur, because then when you've made it, you're not sitting there like, oh man, I got nothing to show for it. I don't have any of the family. I don't have any of the things that I wanted to do all this for in the first place. So we don't get to do these intros that often where it's just us talking about it, but giving our spin. We typically jump into the show, but I think it's cool just because like not every day is an amazing day.
Totally. No,
in
we
this
had
world.
we had a tough November, and
Yeah.
I like to be able to riff on this stuff. I mean, just bringing it back to Deal Machine, it's a driving for dollars app where basically you can skip trace people's information. You can literally take a picture of a house, and it'll tell you the person that owns the house, and it'll also tell you the person that's renting it if it's a rental, which is cool. So just
Gives you their info.
It gives you the information, and then you can build a list and mail out to those people to try to get them to sell you the house, depending on your strategy. But I'm sure you've heard of Deal Machine on all of the podcasts that are out there. I mean, we've heard it on Bigger Pockets. We've heard it on a bunch of others. The story of how he didn't even realize he was marketing it, but Max Maxwell, who is a very successful real estate investor and big YouTube personality, was using this as part of his system. And he would encourage other investors to go use the app. And it sprungboard David's company that he built out of necessity for himself when he was trying to find properties for his own portfolio. And just something that's, I wouldn't say it was luck, but you'll still hear the way the story, he created his own luck, opportunity, preparation and opportunity meets luck or something like that. Or
No,
when opportunity meets preparation.
Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's, I actually don't know if that's the exact quote, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it is. It's when opportunity meets preparation that creates luck. So we'll go with that. I hope that's correct. But I would like to say it was funny because we thought this episode would be a lot about Deal Machine and diving in. And we did talk about the creation, the formation of the business, how it works. But to really get to know the entrepreneur behind the business was awesome for me. We really connected with him. He's a young dude, only 34, and he's had a very high level of success. And he wants more, but he's willing, as he goes through it, he's really focusing on personal development as well. And I think that's important. And focusing, you always create a plan for business, right? But creating a plan for your life is also important. I think a lot of people forget to do that. So this episode will dive in on business, but also mentality. And that was a fun one.
Yep. Let's bring him in.
David, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show, man. As I mentioned pre-recording, we've been following your journey for quite some time now. Very impressive story, and we really can't wait to share it with our listeners. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Corey and Ryan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start here. Take us maybe everybody who's listening, they may or may not know you're the founder of Deal Machine, which a lot of our real estate investors are using. We'll get into what that is, but very successful, and we'll get into that story. Maybe take us pre-Deal Machine and like pre-real estate, if there is a pre-real estate, like kind of who you are, how you came up, and when the light bulb went off to say, wow, like I really want to get in this real estate investing game.
Yeah, so I grew up in a 1,200 square foot house. My parents still live there to this day. So no real estate or business background. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a project manager for AT&T in an IT department. And I did know that I wanted to be an engineer, so I went to school for that. And one of my dad's friends that was at AT&T, he was a consultant. He had his own business, and AT&T would hire him for special projects. He turned me on to the idea of the 4-Hour Work Week, which was, of course, that really influential book by Tim Ferriss. So that was the first ever time I realized like starting a business could be a way that I could, live in a bigger house with maybe a swimming pool, or why some of these kids at my high school had a nicer car than my 1996 Chevy Lumina, which was great to have. But I just knew that I really was motivated by stuff, to be fair. And I went seeking out, answers to how to start a business. And I concluded that just saving for retirement as much as possible is actually in my best interest. So I worked at McDonald's, and my mom was like, you don't have to work. And I was like, no, but I want to. I'm very eager to start making moves so that I could retire by 40, which was some random goal I set in my head, but was motivating. So I was saving as much as I could of my $6 salary at McDonald's. And then after I graduated engineering school, I worked for this guy that bought this software that I made. I had a side hustle, and I had a full-time job, but I was building this fraternity recruitment software because I was after college, and I'd read this book on how to grow a fraternity and use it in my college years. But now I was just building this software because I realized there's an opportunity here for there to be software to help recruit. And the guy who wrote that book ended up buying my software for $10,000 after I worked on it for 2 years as a side hustle. So it's not a lot of money. but I was really impressed that I could actually sell something for the first time. And I ended up working for him after I sold that. And the whole time while I'm working for him and my job right out of college, I was making like 50 grand a year, but saving 50%. So I didn't have any trips. I didn't have a really nice car. I had a rusty Honda Accord, and I lived with roommates. So I was renting one room in this house with like two other guys. And so therefore I was not like set up to be like doing a lot of dating or like having a lot of fun with friends for pretty long, because I was sacrificing that delayed gratification. I was saving as much as possible so I could retire by the time I was 40. Well, 2 years in to this job now where I've sold this guy the software and he's kind of built a business around it. You know, I'm like the software developer, I'm the trainer, and I'm actually also the tech support. And so if there's an issue with the software during recruitment for, you know, that happens usually heavily during the beginning of the fall semester and the beginning of the spring semester. So I had to actually answer the call. And I remember one night very vividly, I'm waking up, you know, the phone rings. I wake up out of a sleep, you know, I slide open the iPhone and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And now I've got to like reach under my pillow to, you know, hit something hard, which is my computer that I'm actually sleeping next to, because I'm so used to having to answer these calls and just kind of working 60 hours, 80 hours a week. And it was okay with me though, because I was so motivated to be working for this entrepreneur and getting to learn as much as I can and save as much as I can, that I was okay with it. Now I'm at my friend's wedding though, and I'm 2 years into this, and I make it through the whole wedding without an interruption, which is pretty remarkable because I'm having these all the time. And I do get a call though, right as I'm about to, you know, dive into my steak at the reception, but I'm kind of frantically looking around like, where's a quiet spot where I can answer this call? And I hustle over to my car in the parking lot where it's just quiet enough to answer that phone right before I know it's about to go to voicemail. And in my car, I actually push the steering wheel in and recline the seat back and grab my computer, which is on the seat next to me, which is the MO for me. I'm always carrying that computer everywhere. And so I pull up in the computer, I ask what's going on, and I finally solve the issue and come back 15 minutes later. And my best friend's wife's like, David, where were you? And I told her I had to go do this tech issue. And she's like, they should hire someone else. And I really, you know, a normal person would absolutely think that or feel like they were being abused. But I loved it because I was just really craving as much knowledge and experience as possible because I knew that time was on my side. But I think she was right. And I realized kind of at that point, after 2 years, that if I'm going to work that hard, it should actually be, you know, for myself rather than somebody else. So I'm thankful for everything I learned in that job. But that's why I think, you know, it's great to meet your heroes, but you shouldn't actually work for them for more than 2 years, because then you've got to put that time in for yourself. So what was I going to do next? I noticed that he had rental properties. He had 5 rental properties. And I also noticed he worked a lot less than I did. And I was like, why do you have these rental properties? And I had been putting all my savings away into this Roth IRA. And that was just in the stock market. And he said, it's because if you look at your stocks that you've invested in, those go up and down over time, right? And I was like, oh yeah, it's down actually since this was like 2016. And so he's like, right. So if you buy the rental property correctly and you manage it well, it will kick off cash every single month. And for me, that clicked. It was a more reliable source of income that I could control the deal that I got and also the way it's managed. So I could predict, well, if I have 16 rental properties, I could retire whenever that is, you know, just calculating, okay, each one has, you know, $600 of cash flow and I would need so much money to replace my W-2 income. So I quickly kind of started looking for rental properties, and I looked on Zillow and I was looking at the estimated mortgage payment. Then I would bring up Rentometer, see what it would rent for, and it would not cash flow. You know, in order to cash flow, the mortgage payment has to be quite a bit less than what it could rent for. And I wasn't finding anything, even in Indianapolis, which is a great rental property market. So I felt pretty discouraged, and I asked him about it, and he said that he bought his deals right after 2008. And so he didn't mean to be discouraging, but I felt discouraged because I thought, oh man, like 2008, that was when market crashed and you could buy these great deals. And it's 2016 now. So, all the prices are quite a bit higher than 2008. And I was discouraged for a little bit, but I kind of looked a little bit further, and I found this real estate meetup in town. And when I went, there was about 80 people there. Many of them were beginners, but many of them were also, doing deals in the present market. That's where I first learned about wholesaling and what that was. And I talked to people that were doing deals. They had deals there at the end. They were like, well, I have this property and I'm asking this much for it. And so that opened my eyes that you could do deals no matter what type of market condition that we were in. And I received the advice to go look for rundown properties. And I thought, great. And 2 months after that, I had a list of 40 properties that I'd been writing down on a piece of paper. And after work, I'm going for an hour before the sun goes down. So I've got limited time to find some rundown houses. But I'm seeing new parts of my city that I've driven by but never gone into these neighborhoods. So I'm having a blast until I see one. It was on College Avenue in Indianapolis, around like the 30th, 40th block. And there was a construction crew out there. And I knew my stomach dropped because that looked very familiar. And I thought, for sure, I have that on my list. So I pull it up. And sure enough, the address is one of the first that I wrote down like 2 months ago. And so I drove home and I looked up. Somebody bought the property, and it was for a price that was more than what I would have offered for it, or less than what I would have offered for it. So I was like, man, this could have been an amazing first deal, but I did not follow up with this right away. And so the very next weekend, I was like, I got to use this basic software knowledge just to make a widget on my phone, because there's not really a cure for my lack of follow-up other than automation. And so I let it pin. I would pin the house instead of writing it down. And then right away, it didn't work like this. But the idea was like, all right, then I can just go look up all these addresses, or have an assistant look up all these addresses, and then go get the mail sent out, which was done by another company via this programming interface. So I had this widget that would do that. And then I showed it to the meetup person a few months later, and I'm just using it for myself. It's not meant to be anything more. But she says, I'll spend $1,000 to try anything new. And I was like, my jaw dropped. I was like, what? I, first of all, didn't even really understand how she bought 30 properties per month. They're like, that just didn't compute. But now, I realized like that was like a turnkey rental operation. She came run that meetup so that they could, feed the turnkeys that they were selling to people out of state in California that would pay top dollar for it. So she did. She said she wanted to spend $1,000. And so I was like, how do I get this on her phone? So then I had to make up a name for this app to put it on the app store so she could get it on her phone, and then set up some kind of payment processor. So it was like a free app, but she could buy, she ended up buying like $700 worth of mail. So I'll never forget that. Brittany Wicks was the whole reason why this thing on my phone became a company called DealMachine that does help people drive for dollars. And it helped me get my very first rental properties too. But man, that's something we could definitely get into. But that's kind of how I started. And just breaking it down was like, man, I got really lucky to work for an entrepreneur, and the rest is history.
You turned a problem here. I have a note here. You turned a personal solution, right, to a problem that you had into a business, right? And people always talk about like, well, how do I start a business? And at the grand scheme of things, what you're doing is you're identifying a problem, figuring out what the solution is to that problem, and then selling it to someone else that also has the same problem or wants to fix that, with a solution. So I think that's really interesting. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that, we ask people, what makes you think that you could be a good entrepreneur? But the fact that you were answering emails or tech support at a wedding and you didn't even realize that you should be doing it for yourself. If you're willing to work that hard for somebody else, then imagine the amount of hours and time and energy you would put into working for yourself. So we can get, draw from one point to another point there that you would be a good entrepreneur. So that's pretty cool. I'm curious about that thought process of that personal solution and what happened next. How did you realize that well, you solved the problem for one person. How were you able to scale this and so other people started using it?
Once it was on the App Store, we actually had SEO because you can put in a keyword, driving for dollars. And there was not an app that allowed you to pin the house and have the mail sent after it looked up the owner, except for DealMachine now did that. So people would find it and I would talk to them on the phone based on whoever signed up. It was a free app. So they put their phone number and email in, and then I would call them. It was not a very intuitive app. So I'd walk them through, it'd take like 30 minutes. And by the time 8 people signed up per day, that took my whole day. It's like 8 times 30 minutes. So I wasn't very smart to group them together, but it was also kind of hard to get them on the just get in touch with them in the first place. So that is when I realized I needed the app to be more intuitive. And my skill set is more on like the back end basic database stuff. I'm not really good at making software look good, but I had a best friend that I worked on projects with that I knew could do that. And I asked him if he'd be a 50% partner and let's actually form DealMachine into a business. So we did that in March of 2017, and he became my 50% partner. And we have not had any other, investments, but we've just bootstrapped it, worked really hard for 2 years before we were able to pay ourselves. And he had income from a spouse and consulting, and then all that savings. Remember all that savings that I had been saving up? Yeah, I blew through all of that until we were able to pay ourselves $3,000 a month salary each, like a year and a half into working on DealMachine.
Cool. So you went from personally from a $7,000, you had $7,000 and you grew it to a $2 million portfolio. Did you use DealMachine to grow that portfolio, or were you buying these deals prior to DealMachine? Like, how did you implement that into your personal portfolio?
Yeah, it was parallel at the same time. The whole reason DealMachine existed was just a widget to help me with my follow-up issues. So I was looking for a property. I didn't get it until 7 months in. I got this phone call, and a very calm, gentle voice, kind of feeble, just said he wants an offer on his house. And I thought, well, I don't know what to say. What's your address? And then I said, can I come at 6 o'clock? And when I came, it was this tiny 600 square foot house pushed way back on the property, completely different than any other deal or any other property in the neighborhood, with a blue tarp stapled on the roof. And when I walked in, I never saw anything like this. His bathtub was running. I said, your bathtub's running, right? And he said, well, yeah, it's because I, don't want it to freeze. And then he had like a furnace that was dug down into the floor of his house. It was using to heat the house. And I just took pictures and just made small talk. He asked what I would offer. I said, I had no idea, but I said, give me 24 hours. I'll get back with you. And I was going to offer $10,000 because there's not a comp really this size, but the best house in the neighborhood was like $100,000. So I was like, to redo this whole place, it's got to be expensive, right? And then I remember hearing the advice: if you're doing your first deal and you don't feel super uncomfortable with how low your price is, that you'd be offending the seller, you need to go lower because your inexperience is not going to make you offer the right price. So I offered him $4,782, and I calculated it by, just the ARV per square foot. And then I minus, all the estimated repair costs, and he accepted it a day later. And so I bought it. I had $4,000, and I used credit cards to, rehab that property. In my very first deal, I had an issue with the contractor where I paid him money for the rehab, but he stopped working. And so I got him to give me a refund, thank goodness, and had somebody else finish the job. But that was actually how I started with my very first property. And then the second property, which is the $7,000. You're right. So not to be confused, but I did make a move on a house before this one I just talked about. I forget it's my first deal because it didn't require any rehab, but it was just a really old listing. And I ended up picking it up with like a really low down payment loan right before I quit my W-2 job. And then I put 4 people in there and rented out the bedrooms like I used to rent, but this is my house now instead. So that was actually the first deal, $7,000. And then I just did more BRRRR deals after that where I could recycle the money.
Cool. So what does your personal portfolio look like today? And, you kind of walked us through a couple ways that you got there, and we can go more into DealMachine, but what, fast forward coming up on 2024, what's your personal portfolio looking like?
Yeah. So Man, I did like 9 deals, and then DealMachine really took off revenue wise. And I just thought the software was a bigger opportunity than continuing to do the Burr deals. So I stopped. And then I looked back at the beginning of this year, and the 9 properties I had, they'd cash flowed $70,000 per year after the mortgage, taxes, and insurance. And they also appreciated nearly $1 million. And I was like, whoa, that would have been so cool to have like twice as many or 3 times as many properties. And I was like, dude, that appreciation is awesome. So I started buying again this year. So I added 5 more. So I'm now at 14. And again, did Burr deals as well. And so it's 14 single family homes. The average rental rate is like $1,600. And I buy them all to meet the 1% rule. So I even have some like 7% mortgages that still cash flow several $100.
Are these all in the Indiana market that you were talking about in the beginning?
They are. Yeah.
Okay.
So I moved to Austin 2 years ago. So I had this analysis paralysis again, all over again. Like I was just starting over. I was like, should I buy more in Austin or should I buy more in Indianapolis? And I finally just decided Indianapolis is definitely the right choice. So that's where I bought the other ones remotely this year.
Well, and Indianapolis used to be a market where people would talk about a really heavy cash flow market. And now it's honestly becoming an appreciation market as well, because a lot of investors went there. They've driven up prices, which is a good thing for people that have owned properties there like you have. So that's pretty cool. We've thought about investing in the Midwest and decided against it, but only because we had a proximity issue and we didn't really know how to manage it from the distance like we do now. So that's awesome. I have a couple other things here for you. So let's talk about DealMachine and you explained it well. DealMachine in 2024 or 2023, how does it work specifically? Like if you can go maybe in some of the details of like, if I was interested in using DealMachine, what would be the way that I would basically interface with the app?
Yeah. So the driving for dollars is what we've been doing for 7 years. But today we came out with unlimited contact info. This past year has been amazing. So, I mean, not only can you drive for dollars and tap, you can just like point the camera at a property and it'll tell you who owns it in real time. And you can press add on any that you do. It automatically takes a picture, sends out that postcard. So that's been enhanced. We also have virtual driving for dollars. So a big problem when I was starting out was I only had an hour of daylight after work. So I couldn't drive afterwards. But now you can virtually, and it's on the mobile phone as well as the desktop. So it's great for somebody who's got a job that doesn't allow you to drive for dollars in the daylight. There's data that you could pull with like 300 different filters. You can also, this is mind blowing to me, is that like we have unlimited contact info that we just launched a couple weeks ago, where if you're looking at a property, it shows you who owns it and who's renting it. And you could see what their income is. You could see how old they are, when their birthday is, and all their emails, and it's all included without having to press like a skip trace button. Like I even have Elon Musk and Barack Obama contact information in my database. It's wild. So this is like a brand new thing for us. It's so powerful. It was a huge hit the last couple of weeks because it's saving people thousands of dollars from paying 14 cents per lookup of, skip trace that they have to do if they're going to do text messaging or cold calling. And then it can run comps. And the biggest difference between any other apps that are out there is that we've highly focused on the mobile apps, which you could tell have like 4,000 reviews and 5 stars, compared to other options that are mostly desktop. And then the mobile app is like the kind of partial functionality with like 52 reviews, half maybe related to the owner of the product. So we've really focused on being able to do every one of those things on the mobile app.
I think that's really smart. Everyone's on their app, on their phones in 2023. So, I'd actually be curious to see the data on who uses what more. But I'm curious, how do you guys, with the evolution of AI over the last couple of years, how have you woven that into your business? I think it's, we've heard ChatGPT, but there's so many different things out there. I'm sure you've used some to take off.
Yeah. So AI, we became an AI company in 2023. It's ChatGPT inside of DealMachine, but it has access to real estate data, which normal ChatGPT doesn't. So that's the advantage of using it through DealMachine. A lot of beginners, and myself included, have analysis paralysis. One of the best ways to use the AI in DealMachine is to say, analyze this deal for a wholesale deal. analyze this deal for a flip. And it will break it down knowing that what it knows about the real estate data. And it will say, you could ask it what you say to a seller who said this, and it can help you negotiate that deal as well. And I'm seeing it get people over that analysis paralysis that you have when all you really just need is like a third party confirmation to say, yeah, the offer you're about to make is correct, or what you're about to say to the seller is going to be good. So that's how I would suggest using it.
So
We call it Alma.
You call it, is that within your app, or is this strictly through ChatGPT?
It's within the app, correct. So you wouldn't know that it is using ChatGPT. I'm just saying that's how the AI portion is powered. It's smarter for real estate because it has access to the data inside the app.
That's really cool, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, one of the things that DealMachine helps you do is be successful and a smart investor in any market, right? I mean, are you finding that, of course the answer is yes, but how are you finding that DealMachine is making investors successful in the markets outside of markets like Indianapolis, where you can still find cash flowing properties? Let's say you live on the East Coast, or you live in California, how can you use it effectively from, not just a market where you would typically find $10,000 homes?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I actually just published this episode called the 25 motivated seller lists and the order that you should approach them with. I think it's like 78, episode 78 on the podcast. That's the title. And it was a big hit because people struggle to know what list to go after first. And the first one is, driving for dollars. And if you're remote, like we had somebody, Corey Czar, who was living in San Diego, which is a very expensive market. You can wholesale there, but the higher the price point is, the more marketing you have to do in order to get a deal. Now you make a bigger spread, but it's just harder to get started. So what he did was he grew up in Minneapolis. He started virtually driving for dollars there. And then he hired like a $20 an hour driver to go find rundown properties there, sent out mail, got calls back, did his first deal in 2 months' time after trying for like 6 months in San Diego. So that's a way that the app can help you. I mean, hiring a driver requires a lot of trust, but the app tells you where they've driven. So they're telling the truth. You're actually checking out properties in person. And if you have a little bit more money, of course, you could just pull the list of tax delinquent properties. I think that's one of the highest motivation, deals out there. In Indianapolis, there's like 1,700 properties that were delinquent on taxes a couple months ago. I just sent out mail from my desk here in Austin. And then I got a few calls back actually from that 1,700, list of mails. But one in particular stood out. My phone's ringing and I was on my treadmill. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this after I'm done working out. But I was like, that feels like procrastination. So I just picked it up, and it was this guy. He owned this rundown property. He wanted me to check it out. Turned out he'd owned it for 2 years. He bought it for $1,000. He owed $180. I told him, I was like, I don't know how to say this, but I can only offer you $160. It doesn't make sense for me to pay anymore. So he brought $20,000 to the closing table, and I bought this property from him. And he, as an orthodontist that makes quite a lot of money in Utah, thought investing in real estate in Indianapolis was a good idea, which it is, but somebody obviously misled him on what values of properties were. He had another one that he bought a lot of these too high. So hopefully I can help him out with a few more. I set him up with my contractor to help him, try to make good use of these properties he'd owned for 2 years and done nothing with. But those are two out-of-state examples on how you could use DealMachine. And so, yeah, incorporated San Diego and Utah in there. But I guess both of my stories were in these low-dollar markets.
No, I mean, it makes sense. But the point is the people that are using the app don't have to live in those markets, right? I mean, and
they don't.
And that's I think the beauty of the technology that you've created. So it's pretty cool. I know that you have a story, a high level success story of somebody making $500,000 using DealMachine. So how did that happen? Like, who is this person, and what's the strategy that they used? Because I'm sure other people would want to.
Yeah, so they have a TV show now called 50/50 Flip. It's Crystal and Dedrick Polite, and they're in the Burlington, North Carolina area. So out on the East Coast with you guys, but in a couple states down. When I first heard their success story, I thought they were making it up because they wanted us to just be including them in their marketing. I now have more business experience, and I realized that they also had more business experience before they just came into real estate wholesaling. And that's why they were able to have success right away. So before, they actually had some franchises of these mall stores where they would give you like kids rides on like these like motorized like scooters and trains. So that was their previous business. They had business experience. So when they learned about real estate wholesaling, they were sending a lot of marketing, and it was to these more absentee owner big lists. And of course, those are great, but they're kind of not highly motivated, because I own absentee properties and I don't really want to get rid of any of mine. So they switched over to looking for rundown properties with DealMachine. And so they had the money to do the marketing and do it seriously and consistently, didn't suffer from analysis paralysis, started getting calls, and they took down enough deals from that. I think it was like 6 or 7, and they had created $500,000 in equity by getting such good discounts on those properties in the Burlington, North Carolina market. So when they told me this, like, again, I just didn't have a lot of business experience. Luckily, I had made this app people wanted, but now looking back, it's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense why this worked for them. And they are, that was definitely, just like the biggest hurdle that beginners have is they use too broad of lists and they don't do enough marketing consistently, but they had the know-how to do it. And now they've got their own TV show where they still document how they're looking for rundown properties to get amazing deals. And then of course, flip them.
Totally. Awesome. What are your goals with DealMachine as you've gotten to this point, right? Maybe more on the entrepreneurial side of running that business. You have your 14 units. Obviously, if good deals come along, you continue to buy them. I think Ryan and I are in a similar position. We've gone away from buying deals ourselves, are going to go probably back into that realm where we've done more of joint venture type stuff. But so anyway, the only reason I brought that up is to ask you about your entrepreneurial ventures and like, DealMachine, what do you want DealMachine to look like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Great question. Well, I was just talking with, a lot of DealMachine has grown through word of mouth from people that have YouTube channels and teach people how to real estate invest. And much like you, Corey and Ryan. So one of those conversations I had recently was with Zach Ginn, and he said, man, I get hit up by people who run these software companies and they just want to build the biggest company and sell it and get out as fast as possible. He's like, I love working with DealMachine. He's like, I can tell you guys are in here for the long haul. And I was like, man, really, how are you able to tell that? But I mean, we've been in it 7 years, and I picture us continuing to do so and to do good for this industry. It's such a pleasure to serve people that want the financial freedom that I wanted so bad when I made this thing for myself. It's way better than serving some, random customer that I don't identify with. So man, in 3 to 5 years, that is a little bit hard for me to picture, but I think that we're going to actually kind of end the pay per skip tracing that people are doing because the data in DealMachine is so good. And then I also think like down the line, we'll end up integrating like, phone conversations. You can make a phone call to sellers here and it will totally transcribe the conversation. So nobody in your team has to leave notes. The notes will be left for you. And then believe it or not, I think we're going to be able to use AI and it's going to be good enough that it simulates your voice answering the phone and takes notes talking to the seller without you even answering the phone yourself. And you could have the option to take it over while you're watching yourself talk to that person in real time. So those are some exciting enhancements that I could see being on the next, 1 to 2 years alone. And the AI landscape changing so fast. We'll see where it goes from there.
It's almost it's so the AI thing is so crazy. It's almost like you could record a conversation, and I'm assuming this is typically how it might work. You could record a conversation that you've had with sellers, maybe 20, and then the AI might be able to pick up on the same questions and have those same answers spit out. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, you could actually give it a sample. There's technologies out there right now. My friend Tiana Lawrence wrote this book, and she could feed the book into an AI website. I forget which one it's called, but only having like a minute recording of her voice, it could narrate the entire book, and it sounds just like her, dude. It's wild. So it's not far off to think that it could answer the phone, have basic conversations as you, and then do the initial pre-qualification before you get on the phone with them. And it's better than you because it's going to answer quickly. And if you're at the gym or you're at your kid's baseball game, you're not going to put it off. It's going to answer 24/7. So it's really exciting to think about what that could be, because I think a lot of beginners especially miss deals because it's a spam call that they didn't know was an actual call from their postcard. Because I get so many spam calls, it's hard to know what's what. And they don't maybe have the money to go to a call answering service. But this could really help beginners, I think, get more deals and stop missing that critical step.
Sure. I'm curious about your take on financial freedom. You seem to have this, I don't know if you know who Chad Carson is. We mention him all the time on our podcast. He's a small but mighty real estate investor, right? So
I got his book right here.
Yeah, he's okay. Wow, right behind. That's crazy. You are that dude. Like that's actually you. So it's funny that I brought that up because you're building a big company. So I shouldn't say that, but your portfolio. It's not like you feel like you need 1,000 units to be successful. So what have you done that's been able to drive you towards financial freedom, or recommendations really for people that can get people to financial freedom without feeling like, oh, I got to listen to someone that's got 1,000 units and then I got to duplicate that. And that's never going to happen because it's so far away and it's this goal that I'll never achieve.
One of the things I'm most proud of is having a business partnership in DealMachine that's lasted for 7 years. Not a lot of partnerships last that long. So in order to do, it's very distracting to be like, oh, you hear this person who's doing these big multifamily deals. And so you kind of stray away from single family to go do that. And I think the reality is a lot of things sound sexier than they are. I know I want my life to be simplistic, which means having as few partners as possible, because every business partner you have is more serious than a marriage. And what's the likelihood that two people diverge on what they want as time goes by? That's just exponential as time, the more partners that you have. And so for me, that's why it's been so clear that I need to buy as many of these properties myself. I've got the whole thing, so I don't have to deal with somebody who automatically just wants to sell and get out of real estate when I don't. And that's been my focus, is to limit the number of partners I have and do as many deals as I can that generate cash flow for myself. And if you talk about people who've got big portfolios like Aaron Amuchastegui here in Austin, Texas, I think he's got about 150 units himself. And I think like 300 or 400 that he's done with a partner. No, he's got 50 himself and hundreds with a partner. He just says, yeah, that the ones by myself that I wish I could have done and would have done more of those. And that's also been my mantra, is to keep my life simple.
Yeah. Awesome. What advice do you think that you would, give your younger self, knowing what you know now? I mean, we typically like to ask this towards the end of the show. But it came to my mind because you're 34, you mentioned, and you've been through the real estate, the business, and I'm sure there's been a lot of, long days, long nights, but I'm just curious about what you think you would tell yourself if you had to do it again, maybe going back to like your 18-year-old self.
I made $50 million of revenue from social media before I realized attention and social media is so important. Because I made an app for myself, other people used it, but the reason it grew is because Max Maxwell and Brent Daniels were teaching real estate investors and recommending DealMachine. So at first, Max, I met him at a conference. He had 100,000 followers on YouTube, and I actually, he posted a fifth video as a vlog about how to use DealMachine, and that started generating traffic for us. And it wasn't until 9 months later that I was like, oh, shoot, if there's some other app out here and they start paying him, he'll switch what he's doing. So I created the affiliate program. I said, hey, I owe you some money. But even years beyond that, I didn't appreciate the value of social media until this year. I took a challenge in order to post 4 times every day because I felt like I couldn't do social media. It wasn't a talent I had. But after, losing some partners, having a bit of a concentration risk, and not really doing any marketing for my business at all, even 5 years in, we had stopped growing. And so that was very stressful. I had just bought like a Ferrari. I hired 20 extra employees. My business partner was having a baby right when a very profitable business went to zero profit because raised expenses and then lowered the traffic coming into DealMachine. And boy, that was stressful. I couldn't sleep. I had to take trazodone to go ahead and like try to go to sleep. And then I'd wake up groggy in the morning, and my mind was always racing. Like, what is the problem? So I'd work into the evenings and late at night, just figure out like what's wrong. But really the answer was, if you can generate attention for your business through marketing, and through social media is like one great avenue for that, then you actually have more control over a critical function of your business than just depending on other people. So that applies for, real estate investors. Like, don't take off November and December and just chill, do your family stuff, and then wonder why there's not a ton of deal flow in January. Keep that going. So that's what I would tell myself to avoid. When you have these like big painful moments, hopefully you learn from those. And I know that I typically always think back to those painful moments when I'm making decisions for the future. And that's the first thing that came to mind when you asked me, like, if I did it over again, what would I change? It would be, start doing our own marketing as DealMachine way earlier than just relying on others to recommend it.
So you mentioned the Ferrari. I think that's pretty cool for a young guy like yourself to be able to purchase. And I think a lot of people, whether it's time freedom, financial freedom, some people are looking for luxuries. There's something for everybody, right? And can you talk to us through maybe how your dreams have become a reality in a certain way from your business? I know you mentioned some high highs and low lows, but I'd like to talk about, like what you do maybe outside of the business for fun, and that keeps you motivated and fueled to go back in and dive in every day.
Yeah. So when DealMachine had like a couple years of no growth, then my personal confidence took a hit, because I had previously been working so much. My entire self-worth was just wrapped up in the success of the business that it was no longer having, according to the goals I had set. I didn't feel like it was doing as well as I wanted it to be. A huge thing that made me feel better was doing that 75 hard mental toughness challenge, exercising, and refrain from working as my only thing, and to lean into some more personal interests. So in 2019, luckily I discovered one of those when my friend Gary invited me to drive a race car for 24 hours in an endurance race. Now, I had never driven a race car or been on a race track. Luckily, though, it was less intimidating because the car was worth $500.
Wait,
And
you drove the car for 24 hours? Like you were
with a team of 4 drivers. And so we switched off. If you needed a break, a driver would rotate. But yeah, the car was out there for 24 hours. The race is called 24 Hours of Lemons, and they do them around the country. It's basically racing's not just for rich idiots, it's for all idiots, is their tagline. So
That's cool.
Yeah. So I never got to test drive the car beforehand because Gary spent all of his time leading up to the race just fixing it, because it's a $500 car and it's got to last for 24 hours of extreme abuse. And I was the second driver to go in the race. So the race is going on. They strap me in. The seat's like way too small, and the unfamiliar straps are so uncomfortable. I tell him I can't do it, but he shuts the door and just says, "Have fun, good luck." So I had nothing to do but to go forward very slowly. All these cars are whizzing by, but every lap I would go a little bit faster, a little bit faster. And when I came in, I realized I was just so present. I couldn't think about what was stressing me out at work. I really couldn't think about anything but keeping the car on the road, trying to go a little bit faster. The weird smells and noises from these other cheap cars driving by way faster than me, and trying to just be aware of my surroundings while pushing the limits was something I fell in love with, because I never had been that present, anywhere in the last 5 years. So a couple years went by, nothing happened. Gary didn't do that race again, but I really wanted to take things in my own hands. So I signed up for this race car school called Skip Barber Racing. And it was a 3-day school, and you got to drive these Formula 4 cars around the Circuit of the Americas track. And, I ended up doing the advanced school 2 months later, and I just got an Airbnb here because it was 70 and sunny compared to Indianapolis, which was like cloudy and 20 degrees. And
Yep,
so
we know that in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yep.
I never left, and I eventually sold my house in Indy, got a place in Austin full time. And there's a club here that has racing is kind of expensive, unfortunately, but the cheapest way you can do it is this club here. They race Miatas. This car is like 30 years old. And so It's $4,000 and we do 18 races per year. So I got a coach and I was getting lapped my first race. But with his help and with weekly practice, I've actually won first place a couple of times now. And so I've really improved. It's been so much fun. And then, I mean, the Ferrari is a car I bought when we hit $1 million in revenue for the first time. Totally separate. That was like 3 years ago, but definitely just in line with like, man, I think cars are so cool. It's been a dream of mine to drive something this cool. I had a mentor, Dan Martell, and we were in a group with 12 other business owners that were doing 10 million a year. Now I wasn't there yet, but some people were. And one of them had a McLaren and he drove me around in it at one of our retreats in San Diego. And I was like, damn, this guy's like 2 years younger than me. And his business was smaller than me at the time. So I felt like, wow, I never realized like I could actually own a car like this. And my mentor's like, don't do it yet. Set a goal. And when you achieve the goal, then buy the car. So
Cool.
we grew the business, got the milestone, bought the car. And then, it's just been really special. I actually like hit a curb with it a year ago. So like 2 years into owning it, and the dealer took like 6 months to repair it. They offered to just give me another one they had in stock, but I was like, no, like this car is more than just the car. Like it means something to me. And so that's the thing with the car.
Yeah. Very cool. I want to go back to something you said, David, about being present. I think that's extremely powerful. And I feel like that doing a couple things, working out, playing golf, like those are some things that center me and keep me present. Cause like candidly, even as I do these interviews, I have to fight off thoughts in my head about the future, about what email I have to send. Like I'm trying to stay, and I love this stuff, right? But I find that so interesting with entrepreneurs. I think that I wonder if I know I'm not alone, but I feel like that's a common theme with entrepreneurs where it's like you have this battle about the future. And that just, for me, it just creeps in about a lot of things in my life. Just like, what's next? What am I doing next? Like, what am I not doing right now that could put me in this position to do this? And it's like staying centered, man, has been, I'm not going to lie, it's been really, really hard, but it's something that I think that it's just, maybe you never like get there fully. You just have to try to create more moments that allow you to stay present. And maybe losing control a little bit with that race car kind of was like, oh, I can't think about anything else, right? I imagine that's what the feeling was like.
Yeah, 100% of your brain cycles are focused on that. So you can't think about anything else. I've struggled with what you described for years. I'm so glad playing golf helps with that for you.
Yeah.
I would say, and the twist of the knife is when somebody you care about that you're hanging out with says, are you listening to me? And you care about what they're saying, but it's like, oh man, like this really is hurting my relationships and it's not what I want, but it's so hard to stay focused when you've got, a million things on your plate. Totally agree.
Yeah. I think that there's no real solution to it. I know he's better than I am with it because he can put his phone down and like shut it off and just be like, he knows that it's not too important. He'll get back to it. But I struggle with that. And I think that I think it's an entrepreneurial blessing and curse. It's how you get ahead, but it's one of those things that like the more you do, the more you have to try to scale back at a certain point and cut things out that aren't working. So I found that to be a challenge. I'm curious if anybody in our audience, just shoot us a DM if that's something you struggle with too, because I'd love to talk about it. But
man, this other thing that helped was taking a beginner improv class, because they play these games that you have to be present for in order to respond back and keep the game going. It's definitely one of the things I've loved on my journey to just being more present and not just only working. That's helped carried over in other areas too. So that might be something that anyone having that issue might check out.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think another recommendation that I was thinking of is like, try to be present. You have to be present in the journey, even if you don't feel like you're not there yet, because then there's no like real peak, right? You just keep going and going and going. But if you can't train yourself to be present, then like not being present for 5 years and then trying to do it all of a sudden, like you're not even going to know how that muscle works in your brain. So even along the journey, like Ryan and I are not at a point where we feel like we can take our foot off the gas. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that being present is kind of a skill that you have to learn, and sounds like you've learned it. So cool. Or maybe better than you used to be. Yeah.
the way I realized I was getting better is when you check out at the grocery store, typically they'll say something to you and I'll say something back while I'm looking at my phone. But in improv class, you had to make eye contact. And when I started making eye contact with the person who's checking out my groceries, and I just said, yeah, thanks, have a great day, looking them in the eye, they were like, whoa, you're welcome. Like, it was a big deal for them because nobody pays attention through these mundane things in life. But just that little bit of attention you could feel it, and it matters to people.
Cool. So last question for me as we wind down the show is, David, what is your why? I mean, like, we kind of talked about that with the presence thing, like, the ability to be present is leaning in that direction of that sort of question. But like, what gets you out of bed every morning? Like, what keeps you motivated? What do you strive to, why do you do what you do every day? It's not easy being an entrepreneur, although sometimes it does look glamorous to the untrained eye.
Yeah. Well, I have a partner and he works really hard. So if I'm not working hard, I feel like that might result in a problem. And I like to keep my partnership going more than 7 years and keep the business healthy for not only all of our customers, but our team as well. So that's a huge why for me, is to reflect what my partner is giving and at least try to match that at this point. So that's a huge why. And also, I mean, I'm always looking to grow. I feel like if you're not growing, you're dying. An example would be if you have employees and your company is not growing, they're going to build their skills and want to make more. But if your company hasn't grown, there's no more opportunities for them to make more. So they're going to leave. And then you're going to have to find someone else and train them. They'll lose the context. It'll be even harder for your company to maintain, let alone grow. So I just think that's also true as a person, and the growth that you get from operating and growing a company is very rewarding. I think I wanted to retire when I was 40, but the big secret is nobody actually wants to stop working. They just want work that's very meaningful and the freedom to go do doctor's appointments or hobbies whenever they want. So those are my biggest whys.
Cool. David, this has been awesome. I think you've inadvertently sold us on DealMachine. I know that you probably just have it on repeat, even though you weren't trying to sell us on it, but it really seems like a great tool to help people find off-market deals and just streamline that process so you don't have to do it the old-fashioned way. You can do it the new-fashioned way and still be as successful. So thank you for sharing that. It's been awesome to get to know you and your story. If people want to learn more about you, they want to maybe just network, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Instagram, Lecko would be a great way to get in touch.
Cool. Thanks again, man. This has been awesome.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Corey and Ryan. You guys are great hosts.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Weekly Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod, where we post daily tips and tricks and document our own journey towards financial freedom. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice.